Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the auditorium. Thank you for all who are out there on Zoom for our third and final plenary session of the Hancock Symposium. We are so glad that you are here. If you are in the audience, please remember to silence your cell phones. For everyone, we'll have a chance after Dr. King's presentation for some Q&A. So for those of you in the auditorium, you're welcome to come down to the microphone in the front. And for those of you who are watching this via Zoom, please feel free to send in any questions that you have via the chat function in Zoom. All right, so as I mentioned in my opening remarks at the symposium yesterday, the events of the past year have been historic. A pandemic, racial unrest, political and economic turmoil, and ongoing environmental concerns. Enough to try a soul. And over the past 3 days, we have had a chance to listen, think, critically reflect, and ponder the meaning of these events in our lives and how we move forward, hopefully to a better and brighter future. Last year, I taught 2 new courses at Westminster, an experimental course in positive psychology and an honors seminar that examined the general topic of happiness. And these were really wonderful experiences for me and hopefully for my students as well, as we explored issues that are central to our existence as human beings, what makes us happy and sad, how we can get away from the rat race to focus on finding a sense of place and meaning and purpose in our lives, and how we can flourish as human beings in the middle of all the chaos that was exploding around us last year and really continues to do so in 2021. Those classroom experiences were soothing to me, and I hope for my students as well, as I learned from them as they learned from me. And we have students from those 2 courses in the audience today. I met Laura King a few years ago when she graciously agreed to be the keynote speaker at one of our honors dinners here at Westminster, sponsored by Alpha Chi. And I have admired her work for a long time, as she is one of the leading scholars in my own field of social and personality psychology, and has done such exciting work in the areas I was teaching about in the last year. So as we worked over the course of last spring to develop a list of dynamic speakers on the symposium topic of Beyond 2020, Dr. King was at the top of my list to invite. And when the Hancock Symposium Committee reviewed her qualifications for this kind of talk, they overwhelmingly agreed that we wanted her as a plenary speaker for this symposium. And we are so grateful that she accepted our invitation, really with a tremendous amount of excitement and enthusiasm. I know, and we just talked about this, that she is absolutely delighted to join us in person today. We placed this plenary last in our series of talks for a reason. We encourage everyone to reflect on all that we have learned from this symposium and to find a sense of meaning and purpose that will help all of us to forge a better tomorrow. Dr. Laura King received her AB in English Literature and Psychology at Kenyon College in Ohio, and her PhD in Personality Psychology from the University of California at Davis. She was on the faculty of Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas for 10 years, prior to moving to the University of Missouri at Columbia, where she is Curators Distinguished Professor of Psychological Sciences. Dr. King's research concerns well-being, especially meaning in life, the life story, and folk theories of the good life. Whatever the topic, her work reflects an enduring interest in what is healthy and functioning about people, and includes recognizing psychological functioning in everyday people and their everyday lives. She has published more than 100 articles and chapters, often with undergraduate and graduate student collaborators. At SMU, she received 5 different outstanding teaching awards. For her scholarship, which has been funded by the National Institutes of Mental Health and the National Science Foundation, Dr. King received the Carol and Ed Diener Award for Distinguished Contributions to Personality in 2011, the Award for Distinguished Service to the Society for Personality and Social Psychology in 2015, and the 2018 Jack Block Award for Distinguished Research in Personality Psychology, the highest honor in her field. She was recently elected president of the Society for Personality and Social Psychology, for which I proudly belong. And Dr. King has served as editor or associate editor for a number of journals and was the first woman to edit the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Personality Processes and Individual Differences, the top journal in personality and social psychology. She is currently the editor of Perspectives on Psychological Science, published by the Association for Psychological Science. And finally, she is the author of The Science of Psychology, an Appreciative View, 5th edition, the textbook I'm currently using in my introductory psychology course this semester. So students, Dr. King is the woman. Please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Laura King.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, David, for that incredibly gracious introduction. I did not realize that y'all were using my textbook, so you probably were expecting a much thinner woman with brown hair. But here I am, in any case. These are the remains of Laura King. It has been just a pleasure to visit with you all today on your lovely campus, this remarkable symposium that brings together so many different views of all of the different ways that our lives have been transformed as a part of this pandemic. When I was asked to give this presentation, I was so excited because I imagined that it would be the first one, like the first presentation I'll give in person. And we won't be wearing masks and we won't have to social distance, and because everyone will be vaccinated and this whole nightmare will be behind us. So that didn't work out the way I had expected, but it's still absolutely just tremendous to be with you here in person. I believe the pandemic has been hard on everyone, but people maybe don't realize how hard it's been for extroverts. And extroverts in the United States have it pretty easy, but not during a pandemic, right? It's very difficult when part of what makes your life worth living is getting a chance to talk to people, to not be able to see them except through a Zoom screen. So it really is a tremendous honor to be here today. So I'm going to talk about this topic that I spend all my time thinking about, which is the experience of meaning in life. And to talk about how is meaning in life relevant during really difficult, chaotic times. Before I get started, it might be a good idea for everybody to just forget everything you think you know about meaning in life. People have, no, it's not working. Oh, sorry, now it's working really, really well. People have lots of ideas about meaning in life, and I should say, like, right, meaning in life. That it is somehow an experience that is reserved, right, for only a few elite people who have the time and the resources to sit around and really think about what makes life meaningful. Or maybe it's about these super profound experiences, something you have to earn, or like Aristotle might say, that we'll wait until you're dead, and then the rest of us will look at your life and decide if it was a good one or not. So I want to move meaning in life off of that pedestal and think about meaning in life in a different way. One of the things that people will say to me, you know, oh, Dr. King, how can you study meaning in life? Isn't it ineffable? Meaning it cannot be defined, right? If you can't even define it, how can you study it as a scientist? Well, sure, we can define it. I mean, you know, psychologists can define lots of things. It may not be perfect, but we can come up with a decent definition, right? This is a definition that my students and I proposed many years ago, that lives may be experienced as meaningful. By the way, I have a cold. It is not COVID. Lives may be experienced as meaningful when they are felt to have significance beyond the trivial or momentary, to have purpose, or to have a coherence that transcends chaos. And these highlighted words, significance, purpose, and coherence. Most scholars in psychology recognize that the experience of meaning in life has at least these three components, at least these three things. When someone says their life is meaningful, they at least mean something like their life matters to other people, that their life is driven by personally relevant goals and aims, and that their life makes sense on some level, right? That their life experiences fit into a unifying whole. The other thing I want to highlight is this word right here, experience. As a researcher in psychology, I'm interested in well-being. That is how a person feels about their life. Not just, not some abstract thing, and there may be philosophers in the room, and that's fine if you are, but I'm a psychologist. So I'm interested in people's subjective experience of their life as meaningful or not. I'm not interested, as a theologian or a philosopher might be, in the meaning of life. I'm interested in the experience of meaning in life. So we cannot just define meaning in life, we can also measure it. And we measure it by just asking people questions like this, right? So on a scale from 1 to 7, how true is this of you? My life has a clear sense of purpose, or my personal existence is meaningful, right? These very straightforward, what psychologists would call face valid questions about a person's life. And we ask people to rate these items, right, on a scale from 1 to 7. Now, some of you might be thinking, those of you who are existential philosophers, for example, oh my goodness, right? This is horrible. How can you study something as important and complex as meaning in life and just ask people to rate these dumb items? Like, seriously? Here's what's interesting about these items and others like them. When people rate them, right? So we have, on a scale from 1 to 7, how meaningful is your life? High scores, people who give those items high ratings, their lives are better off in a host of ways, often over time, right? Prospectively. So it might seem kind of weird and even heretical to measure such a grand idea as meaning in life using self-report ratings on these kinds of items. But people who rate their lives as meaningful have, slower age-related cognitive decline, less risk of Alzheimer's, less risk of heart attack, less risk of cancer, better recovery from a heart attack, lower risk of suicide, lower risk of suicidal ideation, even in the presence of extreme depression. They are more socially appealing to others. The results of studies like these have led many countries, including the United Kingdom, to begin to add measures of meaning in life into national assessments of national well-being, right? So we know for whatever it is that people mean when they say their life is meaningful, it matters. It matters to their psychological health and physical health and economic health. Meaning in life predicts lifetime earnings. Okay, so we asked people about these, this kind of meaning in life, rate your meaning in life. And one of the things that people often think is that, well, meaning in life, though, is really about these deep, big, profound experiences of life. And it is. Of course it is. Yes, it is, right? Marriage, childbirth, religious faith, right? Very, graduation, all these kinds of things, these big life transitions. Yes, meaning in life is related to profound things in people's lives. But that's not all it is. It's not limited to those profound moments of our existence. In fact, meaning in life is related to everyday experiences. and everyday things that people do. Like I'm gonna share this quote from William James that for some reason I didn't put on the slide. William James, one of the founders of the science of psychology, said, "All goods are disguised in the vulgarity of their concomitants in this workaday world. But woe to him who can only recognize them when he seeks them in their pure and abstract form." Every good we know, every good we need, every good we have in life, with James put it with a capital G, is embedded in our everyday experience. And woe to us if we don't see it there. So meaning in life isn't just part of profound experiences. It's an experience embedded in our everyday quotidian existence. So for example, one of the most robust predictors of meaning in life is being in a pretty good mood. This isn't just a correlational relationship. You might be thinking, well, of course, people whose lives are meaningful are probably happier. Sure. Could go either way. As the psych majors know, correlation does not imply causation. But this is the result of an experiment, and we've done tons of experiments like this, where we experimentally put people in a good mood, a bad mood, or we left them in a neutral mood, right? So they just came in our lab and they completed a measure of meaning in life. So we put these folks in a bad mood, these folks in a good mood, and then they rated their meaning in life. And we've done this now. We had people write about a happy memory or a sad memory, listen to happy music or sad music, give them an unexpected payment of $20, have them read the comics. I mean, just like, you can put people in good moods, right? Give them a cookie they weren't expecting. And this is not, we find this in so many groups of people. It does not just college students. If you put people in a good mood, they rate their lives as more meaningful. Notice too, this bar over here, because we're going to talk about difficult times. Notice putting someone in a negative mood is not lowering meaning in life below the neutral group. And this is our first hint that negative experiences they do not, quote, shatter meaning. That meaning can exist even in the presence of negative feelings and negative events. Here's something else we did. So these are a couple of studies we did. That coherence aspect of meaning, right? That meaning in life is in some ways about feeling like your life makes sense, that it fits into a unified whole. So my students and I we're thinking, if that can actually make life meaningful, if that contributes to life feeling meaningful, then life should feel more meaningful when the world makes sense. So here's what we did. We had two groups of participants. We had 16 pictures of trees. For each of the 4 seasons, right? And you can see these pictures are recognizable, right, as spring, summer, fall, and winter. So 16 pictures. We had 2 groups of people. We told them, just take a look at these pictures. You're going to see a series of pictures and tell us how they look on your computer monitor. It was an online study. What they didn't know is that for half of them, those pictures went spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, right? 4 cycles of the 4 seasons. The other half saw the pictures in a random order with no seasonal pattern. Immediately after they did that task, they rated their meaning in life. We did it a couple times. As you can see, the bright blue bars are the people who saw those pictures in the seasonal pattern. Just being exposed to stimuli that makes sense, right? That represent a well-known routine made life feel just a little more meaningful. We've taken this kind of pattern, this kind of idea, and applied it to everyday life. Recently, we did a study, one of my former students and I, Samantha Heitzman, did a study of students at the University of Virginia, and we beeped them at random times during the day and asked them what they were doing and if what they were doing was part of their daily routine or not. Are you engaged in your daily routine or not? And then they rated their mood and their meaning in life. And what we found, so crazy. If you were on your routine, life was just a little more meaningful. Now, this is a little bit crazy, right? Like, really, it's something as simple as our everyday routine. And if you think of all the routines you have in life, and something as easy as just being in a pretty decent mood, if those can support the sense that life is meaningful, then life, we had a reviewer of one of our papers say, wouldn't life be brimming with meaning? And we said, maybe it is. What if, not like those existential philosophers would have you think, that you're actually supposed to cope with a life of no meaning? What if actually life is pretty meaningful? Isn't it supposed to be some rare thing they have to work for? So we started wondering, well, is it? What if life is actually meaningful? Is it? So Samantha and I did this project. We went through every survey ever done that we could find where they asked people how meaningful their lives are. So this is just a couple of nationally represented surveys in the US, right? So in this one, they were asked, did you feel that your life has meaning? And 95, yes or no question, 95% of the people said yes. The Baylor Religion Survey asked, do you feel your life has an important purpose or meaning? 83% agreed or strongly agreed. Huh. This is the result of a global survey. It's a Gallup global poll. Shiga Oishi and Diener reported these results. And what they did is they had representative samples of 130 odd nations, and they asked them this question: do you feel your life has a special purpose or meaning? Yes or no? 91% of the people said yes. So that blue arrow is the US, in case you're curious. The red line is GDP. It turns out that nations' meaning in life is negatively related to GDP. We can talk about why that might be a little bit later. What I want to point out right now, though, is look at 91% said yes. Now, some of you are thinking, oh, no, life, I know that life is not that meaningful, right? Like, life is no way that meaningful. Those people are just saying that. And all I'm asking you to do is to consider, if I put this up there and I said, do you feel your life is meaningless? And 91 said yes, 91% said yes. Why would that be more believable? Why is it more believable if I said, oh, how many people are so depressed they have trouble getting up in the morning? And I said, oh, it's 91%. And you'd believe that bad news. But this good news, for some reason, a lot of psychologists don't like this good news. 91% of the people in a giant representative poll say their life has a special purpose or meaning. So the other thing we did is we went through every study that had used an established measure of meaning in life, multi-items. People made ratings, so they're not just saying yes or no, because you're thinking, well, maybe they said yes, but it would really be a low level. And what we found is that the average, so this is a frequency distribution of the average meaning in life espoused on a scale from 1 to 7, and then the number of studies reporting that. And obviously the most common mean is up here around a 5. It's around 4.99, right? So around a 5 on a scale from 1 to 7, significantly above the midpoint of a scale, right? So most people are saying their lives are pretty meaningful. Up here in these high areas, even after the big bump, these are like, I mean, these aren't, you think, oh, is it all college students? No, it is not. Women with breast cancer, people with inpatient in a psychiatric unit, people with addiction issues, just lots of different people say their lives are meaningful. Now, I do want to draw your attention because this is, to me, it's most interesting. This little tiny blip of people who are given their lives, they're basically saying their lives aren't so meaningful. That is a group of undergrads. And I actually think that undergraduates are at risk because this is a time in your life when you're looking for purpose, you're trying to figure out what it's all about. I'm going to talk about purpose in a second, but I think that's great. But I think that search for purpose occurs in a life that actually is full of meaning, even if it doesn't feel like it all the time. Anyway, so life seems to be pretty meaningful. Meaning in life can be defined and measured. It can be related to and emerge from very normal, everyday activities, simple experiences, and it is common, not rare. So how can we place meaning in the context of difficult times, in the context of suffering? So anybody who studies meaning in life has to always talk about Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl really kicked off psychology's interest in the experience of meaning with his famous volume, Man's Search for Meaning, which talked about his experiences in the Nazi concentration camp. From that experience, this is one of my favorite quotes from that book. Frankl said, "What is demanded of us is not, as some existential philosophers teach, to endure the meaninglessness of life, but rather to bear our incapacity to grasp its unconditional meaningfulness in rational terms." That idea, I should say, emphasis added, of unconditional meaningfulness. I believe that life is unconditionally meaningful. And actually, as a foremost expert on the topic, I can tell you with great certainty that your life is pretty meaningful. So even during difficult times, then we have to figure out, we have to recognize and understand where that meaning comes from. And so I want to return to these facets of meaning. And so these are these three components of meaning, right? Coherence and significance and purpose. And these items that you're seeing below each facet is just an example of the way we measure the three facets of meaning. And we just ask people, right? So do you have, when you look at your life, does it fit together into a unified whole? Or even though it's a big universe, I still matter, or I have goals and aims that compel me to keep going. So my students and I have been studying these facets of meaning in the context of difficult times. The first, well, we know, by the way, if you study the experience of meaning in adults, traumatic life events are negatively related to the experience of meaning. But it hasn't really been the relationship between actual negative times and actual feelings about the meaning of one's life hasn't been studied as much as you would think. But we've been looking at it in the context of what are called adverse childhood experiences, or they're called ACEs. Adverse childhood experiences is just an umbrella term that refers to many negative things that can happen to a person in childhood, right? Such as the loss of a parent, parental divorce, childhood physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, having a parent have a serious or life-threatening illness, have a parent be arrested or spend time in prison. So it's just a long, it's like basically a checklist of bad things that can happen to children. And recently, psychologists have gotten interested in this because ACEs predict a whole host of negative things later in life, right? Be it physical health or psychological health or economic success, all kinds of lingering effects of negative childhood experiences. And so we were interested in looking at how adverse childhood experiences relate to the experience of meaning in life in adulthood. So we have a couple large samples of people who told us about their ACEs, right? Rated their ACEs, their negative childhood experiences, and rated their meaning in life. And so I want to show you first. So none of the specifics here matter. The most important thing about this picture is this big blank space right here. Why? Okay, so this is a model. Don't worry about it, right? But we have ACEs over here, and we have how much a person says their life is meaningful in a global way over here, right? The outcome. ACEs, when you have had a lot of adverse childhood experiences, it kind of makes it feel like life doesn't make sense. When you have a lot of negative childhood experiences, it might make you feel like your life doesn't matter, right? But having a lot of ACEs is not at all related to purpose. Now, any of the psych majors in here are thinking, or out there are thinking, oh no, not a null result. We are so happy, right? This is the best null result ever. By the way, we did this Bayesian analysis to tell us, because just because the result is null doesn't mean the null is true. We tested the null here. The null is over 1 million times more likely than the alternative to be true. Adverse childhood experiences do not detract from a sense of purpose, but a sense of purpose still contributes to the global sense that life is meaningful, suggesting that, right, we can somehow still find life meaningful because purpose is resilient against the effects of these negative childhood experiences. The only thing that's important about this is the thick line. I realized this was more of a Zoom type slide than for real people's lives. This thick line that goes up. So the x-axis is how many ACEs a person has. And the y-axis is these ratings on these facets of meaning. And you can see that purpose isn't just unrelated here. So this is a group of people who we asked them to write about a negative childhood experience. After doing that, people who were had more ACEs actually had a higher sense of purpose. You can see coherence and significance are both going down. But in the face of negative experiences and reminders of negative experiences, people who had lived through and survived negative childhoods actually report higher levels of purpose. So that suggests that difficult time, right? What do we have during difficult times? One thing we have that can't be taken away is this sense of purpose, right? If you think about, like, what does it mean when things are going poorly, right? When really bad stuff is happening, right? When the world doesn't make sense. And when the world tells us we don't matter, purpose is still there as a source of meaning in life. So Frankl, when he was talking about the folks in the concentration camp, one of the things that he noticed, right, is when people would talk about, does this have any meaning? Many people said, it will have meaning if we survive. It will have meaning if we get out of here, if we make it. They put that condition on how life will be meaningful. Well, look, nobody actually gets out of it, right? I mean, every life will eventually end. And so Frankl said, that's not it. Surviving the concentration camp, right? You cannot put, if life is unconditionally meaningful, you can't put a condition on it like that. He said, a life whose meaning depends upon such happenstance ultimately would not be worth living at all. In some ways, right, if you compare purpose to coherence and significance, purpose is less dependent on happenstance, right? Life often makes sense. It usually makes sense. But random events happen, right? Senseless acts of violence and boring meetings and all kinds of things that we have to live through happen. And we do matter. We mostly do matter. But maybe we're not the center of the universe, right? And maybe it is true that any human life lasts only a certain amount of time, right? But purpose isn't like that. Purpose is available to us no matter what. And even if you think about it, maybe these adverse childhood experiences are actually a lesson, a proving ground where the person has come to some very hard lessons about life and naturally moved, right, to meaning through purpose. Because maybe the world doesn't care. Maybe the world doesn't make sense. But a person still has the capacity to invest in gold. So how does all this relate to the pandemic? Well, first I want to tell you, in my experience, okay, so we have a lot of data that we collected. Like this is some data where at the very beginning, okay, so you have to understand a lot of psychologists in the world did a lot of very mediocre science. As soon as the pandemic started, everyone started sending out questionnaires to everybody and their mom, right? We need to get this data collected because the pandemic's going to end any second now. And we want to make sure we have data while it's going on, which is crazy. But so this is a couple thousand people at the University of Missouri, faculty and staff did this, and then some students as well. And we just asked them, this is just to show you, how distressing has the COVID pandemic been for you so far? This happened maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the initial lockdown in March. And as you can see, first of all, none of these are very, wrong way. None of these are very low numbers. This is meaning in life across how distressed. So here's the highest distress rating. And look at purpose is that tall bar. Purpose stays high. And actually none of these ratings are very low, but purpose is the highest of them all. This is another one. Now then we figured out, okay, this is gonna go on for a while. This was maybe like, we started this one maybe 2 or 3 months during that summer, and then it went on and then it went on. This was right around November of 2020. So we, as you can see, look, the numbers are still pretty high and they got higher, but this dark bar is purpose. And it was significantly higher than coherence or significance. And then this, the people who took these measures of meaning in life, the facets of meaning over the course of entire semester 6 times. And as you can see, this is really high, right? This is a 5 point whatever. That top line is purpose. Now, the problem is these scales didn't exist prior, like no one took these measures. I've gone through all the data we've ever collected on the facets of meaning. It's not that much, but in every case, well, I should say, in most cases, purpose is higher than either coherence or significance, but significance is also sometimes the highest. And I don't know if you saw on that, the graph of people who, where it was aces across the bottom and how purpose looked going up. For people who had relatively easy childhood, the highest facet is significant. And it's kind of an interesting idea that if you've had a very easy childhood and you never really had any adversity, you might get the impression that meaning comes from you being the center of the universe, which is kind of interesting situation to be in adulthood. So I wanted to close with a story. It's weird because, so I've always been interested in kind of the relationship between meaning and that coherence aspect, right? The everyday, the routine, and in that connection between me and the outside world, seasons and sunrises and sunsets. And that interest really, in some ways, was sparked and fostered by this experience I had many years ago when I first started my career at Southern Methodist University. When I was an assistant professor, I also volunteered as a literacy tutor. And I had this student, and his name was Douglas. And he worked at SMU as well. He worked in the food service. And he had a high school diploma. He was a young man in his early 20s. He had a couple of kids, but he could not read. So he was an adult non-reader, and I was going to teach him to read. So I thought that I was going to teach him, like, oh, I'm going to introduce you to the glories of Shakespeare or whatever. What he wanted was to be able to read a manual. He wanted to go from being the cold cut sandwich guy to the fry cook guy at the Commons, and that would allow him to make a lot more money. So we started this journey together. And we agreed that we would meet twice a week, every week for 2 years, which is what is recommended by the Literacy Volunteers of America. So we started meeting, and we met in my little lab room in the basement of the psychology building at SMU for an hour twice a week for 2 years. Now, the thing is, Douglas could not read. He really couldn't read. And it was, we would do all the exercises that they gave us to try and all the little strategies to help adult non-readers, but he couldn't read. And obviously, if someone has gone all the way through high school and not learned to read, they needed this kind of individual attention a lot sooner. And I would say to him things like, Douglas, this is not working, right? Like, you're not learning to read. Like, why are we even doing this? And he would say, Laura, I need to learn how to read. You have agreed to help me. What kind of fool would I be if I didn't just keep trying? And I would be like, okay, Douglas, like, oh my God, yay. Like, yes, we will do it. He was super inspiring. But we met and we met and we met. And he was not learning to read, like not picking up on it. It was a struggle. At the end of each one of our sessions, we would pull out, I would bring him a book. And at this, towards the end of the 2 years, we were trying to read. It was a biography written for young adults of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so what we would do is I would read a paragraph and then I would hand him the book and then he would try to read, struggle, blah, 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 just completely lose all sense of the story and then hand the book back to me. I'd read my paragraph and I'd hand it back to him. So he wasn't learning to read. And I mean, I was just like, how am I going to give someone the gift of reading? What about my needs? But this one day, we go through our exercises, and I pull out the book, and I read my part, and I hand it to him. and he starts reading, like really reading, like you would be reading or I would be reading. If he saw a word that he didn't quite get, he'd figure it out and just keep on going. And it was such a qualitative change. The hair stood up on my arms, right? I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, he was reading. So he handed me back the book and I read my paragraph and I handed him back the book and he just kept on reading. And I thought, you know, has this been 2 years of a ruse? Like, have I been punked? Is this like, how is this possible? This qualitative change. So he hands me the book back. And I said, Douglas, do you know how well you're doing? Like, you're reading. You're really reading. And he started laughing and he said, I know, Laura, it's so weird. I don't know what happened. After our last lesson, I was just walking around and I just started seeing words. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, you know, it's kind of weird. I thought you like see a word, stop, and then read it, and then go on, you know, and then go on. So that's not what you do. You don't stop to read. You're just always reading. And I said, that's right, Douglas. Are you kidding me? I felt like Annie Sullivan, you know, signing water. I'm like, what? He said, I got to tell you something. Do you know they put signs on the corners of the streets so you always know where you are? And I said, that's right. And he said, you know something, Laura? There are signs, and it won't come up. There are signs everywhere. And I said, that's right. And now obviously Douglas was talking about reading, right? We don't turn reading on and turn reading off. We're just always reading. But I think we can think about what he said as applied to meaning. We don't turn meaning on and turn meaning off. We don't have a thing happen and then make meaning out of it. We're always experiencing meaning. We are always engaged in life and meaning. We live in a world that often makes sense. There are sunrises and sunsets. Today's Thursday, tomorrow is Friday, and then it's going to be Saturday. They can't take that away from us. Objects fall down, they don't suddenly fall up. These natural invariants of the world support the sense that life is meaningful. But it's even more than that. Because even if the objects started falling up, even if things didn't make sense, even if we spent a year and a half, things that would make you start questioning the very quality of human nature, right? Communal, can we live with each other? If our survival depends on each other, can we make it? Basic questions like that can start to impinge, right, on a person's view of meaning. Even when the world stops making sense. There's more than that even. There's something inside us. The why of life. That sense of purpose. Because, you know, even when the world stops making sense, I still think Douglas was right. There are signs. everywhere. Thank you.
All right, we have a chance at this point in time for anyone in the audience who would like to come down and ask questions. Then we'll also entertain questions that people have on social media. So would anybody like to come down and ask the first question?
Hi, thank you for coming to talk. You were great. I loved hearing your perspective. I actually am, in fact, a philosophy student here. Yeah, so I'm also in the political science department, and that's a little more what my question is related to. So the correlation that seems present, like between economic well-being and lack of meaning in life, I noticed that a lot of the Nordic democracies that tend to score pretty high on the happiness scales are some where people experience less meaning. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about why that might be the case.
If I could back up, I'm done. We're done. Okay. I can tell you exactly what it is, right? So many people, you look at that weird negative relationship between GDP and meaning in life. And it's fully explained by religion. And there's no question that religious faith supports the sense that life is meaningful. There's this Crystal Park, who's a psychologist at the University of Connecticut, and she has this whole theory, right, that there's a reason why religion is so strongly related to meaning in life, because it hits meaning on all cylinders, right? It gives you a sense of coherence, it gives you a sense of significance and belonging, and it gives you a sense of purpose. So that is explained by national levels of religious faith. I did want to mention, though, that you know, I don't think people like, how do I put this? Knowing that that meaning in life is related to religious faith doesn't tell us all that much. Well, it tells us one thing, right? About like, that's one way people find meaning. But I want to make it clear that those components, right, the ways that religion brings meaning to life suggest that meaning is available even outside of established religions, right? There's no question that it is like religion is one of those ways that you can plug your personal life into a much broader framework and feel a sense of meaning. But personalized philosophies of life and meaning systems may have a very similar impact, except they don't typically promise literal immortality that religion does. The other thing about the that actually Oishi and Diener did not look at is lifespan, and honestly, the salience of death actually makes life more meaningful. Something to think about.
Okay. So funny enough, I'm also a philosophy student. Not only that, but I'm actually literally taking a class called The Meaning of Life.
Yeah. But like prepositions are very important
Yeah.
in this situation, right?
I guess two questions. One kind of simple one. The quote at the that you said towards the beginning, about those who can't find the meaning, it was like a fancily worded one with the woes, but it was about those who can't find the meaning of their life in the now. Which one was that? Do you remember? It's like, okay, it's fine. Yeah,
I don't.
Don't worry about it. And I guess the second question is this I guess is slightly off topic, but the story you told about the student who was having difficulty reading, it's kind of odd to me that he kind of just did it all of a sudden almost. Do you think maybe it was like, it almost sounds like maybe part of his brain was like physically underdeveloped, and do you have any idea what caused that and how he got to that point?
I wish I knew. And
Okay.
I'm not, that's like, I was doing it as volunteer work. It's
Yeah.
not my scholarship at all. But talking to other people who have done literacy tutoring, I think that it is not typical, but not unheard of.
Okay.
That it happens super fast like that in a way that you're not expecting. And because when all of us think about reading as, like, if I asked you, oh, if you read beyond 2020, what are you doing? And you think, well, I know what B sounds like and E sounds like and Y sounds like. But the truth is almost all of the reading most adults do is completely done by memory. The fact that you've memorized that word, you know what the word is. And when an adult non-reader is learning to read, it's really hard for them because it's such a failure rich experience that I think there is like a switch. It is like a switch gets turned. So yeah, it's crazy. Thank you.
Hello. So I was wondering, you said that in countries where religion is more prevalent, there's a higher meaning in life. I was wondering, do you also find that correlation, I suppose, in cultures, like not counting in religion? Do you find that certain cultures happen to have a greater meaning in life?
Yes, or I would say, okay, so to the extent that a culture has established religions, they are likely to have higher meaning in life. And then the other way to think about it wouldn't be so much whether the level is higher, but where the meaning comes from, right? And so people in more individualistic society, like now that we're actually taking meaning apart and studying it in this more like significance and purpose and coherence, then I think it gives a thing to think about. Like, for example, it may be that significance is a more personal significance is more important, right, in a more individualistic culture versus maybe significance is defined in a very different way in a more collectivist culture where it's more about literally belonging to a fabric of people. So there's not a lot of work looking at those kinds of differences, but rather I think the idea is, where does meaning come from across cultures?
Hello. So you mentioned that undergraduates are typically the ones who don't find meaning in life as easily. So I'm wondering what your advice to that would be.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. So it's so interesting. When I give talks about meaning in life and I talk about, oh, well, no, life is actually pretty meaningful. When I talk to senior citizens, they're all just nodding. Yes, Dr. King, we know. And I talk to other community groups, no problem. Ask a fifth grader or a third grader. When my son was like in second grade, and he's like, how you go to the office and work? What do you even study? And I told him, well, I like to study what it is that makes people think their lives are meaningful. And he started laughing and like, why would you even need to ask that? What kind of an idiot doesn't know their life is meaningful? I'm like, oh, you're so adorable. The only group of people who object when I tell them life is meaningful is typically undergrads. And they'll look at these graphs, right? And they'll say, oh, those people think their lives are meaningful because they don't know what meaning in life is, right? And I say to them, well, I'm a psychologist. I didn't invent meaning in life. I don't want to study a quality that I invented that no one gets to have. I want to study it as people actually experience it. And it made me realize that these undergrads are putting meaning in life on a pedestal. You're separating meaning in life, right, from your life right now. Your life right right now is meaningful. It matters. It matters so much. I don't buy any of this crap. You'll read from psychologists about how, oh, the youth of today, they have their self-esteem is inflated, they're narcissists, blah, blah, blah. I know that's baloney. I think that's garbage. So many garbage ideas from psychology talking about what it means to be a young person or a young adult in the US right now. People, because I think college is that time. It's the time when you're questioning, you're thinking, you're developing that sense of identity, you're deciding on what you're going to do. That search is wonderful. Stay up late at night talking with your friends about it over a legal beverage. That's absolutely wonderful, right? It's normative. It's what you're supposed to do. But that search, that questioning is occurring in the context of a life that's already meaningful. It's not something you have to earn. And I think that actually, like those times, connecting with other people, having daily routines, enjoying the simple pleasures, the wonders of nature, all the things that your heart, right, that your heart is telling you to do, that your soft animal body tells you to do, right? That all of those things are also meaningful, right? I just think that young adults have a tendency to put meaning out there as something they'll get eventually if they work hard enough, and that it's simply not true. Yeah, you'll have all those great things, but the here and now is also important. Think about every once in a while, I don't think it's such a bad idea to think about, what if you were leaving on a trip and you're going to travel for a year? What would you do this weekend? And do that. Spend time with the people that you know you'd want to see and the people you know you'd want to talk to. Being invested in the future is so important, and that's great, right? Delaying gratification, doing all those things about laying the groundwork for your future life, that's all wonderful. But the here and now is valuable and it's meaningful.
Are there other questions from the audience? I do have a question for you, Laura. Our entire symposium is beyond 2020, and I'm wondering whether you think the events of the last year will help people to perhaps redefine the purpose in their lives?
I do. I think it might. I don't want to sound like total Pollyanna here. I feel like, I'm not a resilient coper. When I've had negative things happen to me, I tend to feel bad for a long time. I'm not whatever, oh, I got it. I'm not that person. But I personally found this whole pandemic experience to be pretty much awful. And yet, I have definitely seen in humanity that it's possible to discover strengths that you didn't know you had during this difficult time. I think that it has called people towards different things that maybe they didn't know they could do, didn't know they wanted to do, didn't know they could pursue. And for some of us, for me, it has meant spending a lot more time alone and in a quiet way that is not my preferred method, but now has turned out to be something I value. So I do think that there can be good things that have come from this very difficult experience. I personally think we will know whether that's true in a couple of years rather than right now. I hope so. Doesn't always seem that way though.
Folks, please join me in thanking Dr. King once again.
Thank you all.
And thank you for coming to the symposium. We hope that you have found this to be a wonderful experience. As I said at the very beginning of this, I hope this encourages us to think, reflect, critically evaluate and come away a better people at the end of Beyond 2020. So thank you so much. Don't forget, there is one more event that's coming, our post-symposium workshop this afternoon.